Look at him. Really look at him. To the casual viewer, this is just Jackson Storm, the arrogant tyrant who destroyed Lightning McQueen, a machine built for hate. But what if I told you that the established narrative is a complete lie? If you dig into the deleted scenes and the darkest corners of the official lore, a horrifying truth emerges. This isn't a story about a monster born of malice. It is a tragedy about a corporate hostage. He is a meticulously engineered defense mechanism. He is a victim of systemic corporate abuse and a broken prodigy trapped in a high-speed prison. By the conclusion of this comprehensive psychological deconstruction, the hatred for the next-gen champion will evaporate. It will be replaced by a profound, unsettling empathy. To understand the psychological fracturing of the character, one must first analyze the physical vessel he was forced to inhabit. The design philosophy behind Jackson Storm was ruthlessly intentional. The creative directives mandated the invention of an antagonist who contradicted the established protagonist, Lightning McQueen, in every conceivable metric. Where McQueen's aesthetic is characterized by round, flowing lines reminiscent of classic Americana, Storm was mandated to be sharp, angled, stealthy, and deadly. The engineering team developed a profile that was super low to the ground, an aggressive shape designed to evoke the imagery of a weapon on wheels. Every aspect of his visual identity was curated for maximum intimidation. While McQueen proudly wore a vibrant, iconic lightning bolt, Storm's graphics were strictly minimalist. Designers utilized the international symbol for a hurricane, transforming it into a sharp, striking S shape that adorned his dark exterior. The physical specifications of this machine highlight the insurmountable technological gap he represented. The data reveals a terrifyingly efficient piece of machinery. Chassis? Hydroformed alloy and steel. Body construction? Carbon fiber and metal composite. Acceleration 0 to 60? 3.6 seconds. Recorded top speed? 214 miles per hour. This technological superiority, however, served as his first psychological cage. The industry did not view Jackson Storm as a sentient being. They viewed him as a proprietary asset, an algorithm wrapped in carbon fiber. He was the poster child for the next-gen takeover, the literal embodiment of the shift from the grit and soul of traditional racing to cold, analytics-driven performance. This expectation of mechanical perfection laid the groundwork for his eventual emotional collapse. But the tragedy of Jackson Storm begins with a fundamental, widely ignored truth. He was never supposed to be a physical race car. Long before the events of the 2016 Dynaco 400 or the Florida 500, Storm existed in a vastly different ecosystem. He was a cyber sportsman. The official prequel lore establishes that Storm made his living entirely within the digital realm, playing a highly popular racing simulation video game known as Super Corsa 3. In this environment, Storm was a dominant force, an esports champion who navigated virtual tracks with unparalleled precision. Psychologically, this detail is the keystone to unlocking his entire behavioral profile. The digital world of Super Corsa 3 provided a controlled, insulated sanctuary. In a video game, the physics are absolute, the variables are manageable, and, most crucially, there is absolutely no risk of physical harm. A crash in a simulator does not result in twisted metal, career-ending injuries, or the horrifying spectacle of a shattered chassis. It results in a reset button. Within this digital sanctuary, Jackson Storm was content. He had earned a substantial amount of money from his cyber sport career. He valued his personal freedom. He possessed a quiet, solitary agency over his own existence. He had absolutely no desire to enter the chaotic, highly politicized, and physically dangerous arena of professional piston cup racing. He was a gamer who had found his niche, perfectly adapted to a world without real-world consequences. So, who broke him? To understand the destruction of Storm's digital sanctuary, we must introduce a figure who embodies the darkest extremes of corporate greed. The true villain of the next-gen era is not the black and blue race car. It is a billionaire entrepreneur named Axel P. Biggs. To understand the monster, you have to meet the maker. Axel P. Biggs, the founder of Biggs Industries, amassed his immense wealth through computer software development and the creation of an internet search engine. In the official expanded lore, he is formally categorized as a corrupt businessman. His behavioral profile is defined by manipulation, abuse, stalking, and systemic blackmail. When his son, A.P. Biggs Jr., developed an interest in sports, the billionaire decided to forcefully insert himself into the Piston Cup racing series. Utilizing his vast resources, Biggs constructed the Biggs Industries Racing Complex in 2015, establishing it as the most technologically advanced training center in the world. But Biggs had a specific vision. He recognized that the future of racing relied on the hyperfast reaction times and algorithmic precision found in gamers. Upon discovering the popularity of Supercorsa 3, Biggs executed a ruthless corporate maneuver. He outright purchased the software company that developed the game. With the game under his total control, Biggs organized a massive online esports tournament. The public objective of the tournament was a massive cash prize, but the hidden, true objective was to identify and recruit the game's greatest player as the 9th and final trainee for the Biggs Industries racing team. The victor of this corporate trap was Jackson Storm. Following the tournament, a scout named Ray Reverham was dispatched to officially recruit the digital champion into the physical racing program. But as we previously established, Storm immediately and firmly declined the offer. He was satisfied with his winnings. He cherished his independence. He rejected the proposition of altering his life to serve a corporate racing team. In a healthy industry, the refusal of an athlete marks the end of the negotiation. Axel P. Biggs, however, did not accept refusal. When informed of Storm's rejection, the billionaire leveraged his absolute power to execute a devastating act of psychological coercion. Biggs blackmailed the young cyber sportsman with an inescapable ultimatum. He informed Storm that if he did not sign the contract and become a physical racer, the billionaire would force Storm to return every cent of the prize money he had rightfully won. Furthermore, utilizing his newly acquired ownership of the Supercorsa 3 software company, Biggs threatened to permanently blacklist Storm, ensuring he would never be involved in the video gaming business again. This singular event represents the traumatic fracturing of Jackson Storm's mind. The autonomy he cherished was violently and completely stripped away. He was presented with a horrific binary: submit his physical body to a dangerous, high-speed sport he actively avoided, or face total financial ruin and the permanent erasure of his entire identity and livelihood. Facing the total destruction of his world, Storm succumbed to the blackmail. He accepted the offer. The character that arrived at the training center was no longer a free individual. He was a corporate hostage. The psychological ramifications of such severe coercion are profound. When an individual is forced into a highly visible, high-stakes profession under the threat of ruin, the resulting emotional profile is almost universally characterized by deep-seated resentment, a desperate need to reclaim control, and the construction of a hostile exterior shell to protect a deeply vulnerable core. The arrogance that audiences despise was born right there, in the office of a corrupt billionaire. Trapped in his new reality, Storm was relocated to the Biggs Industries Racing Complex. He was integrated into a cohort of highly competitive recruits, a group that included future Piston Cup racer Tim Treadless. The environment was clinical, isolating, and relentlessly demanding. It was entirely devoid of the warmth or mentorship found in organic racing communities. It was within this pressure cooker that Storm's abrasive persona rapidly calcified. Stripped of his freedom and harboring immense anger toward his captor, Storm's behavior deteriorated significantly. Reports from the facility describe a recruit whose cockiness was hard to deal with. This frequently manifested in bullying behavior toward other members of the training center. He aggressively monopolized the high-tech racing simulators, demanding constant access. From a psychological perspective, this behavior is a textbook example of displaced aggression. Unable to strike back at Axel P. Biggs, the omnipotent billionaire who held his future hostage, Storm projected his internal rage onto his peers. By bullying other trainees and seizing total control of the simulators, the very machines that provided a desperate, simulated connection to his lost digital safe haven, Storm was attempting to assert a microscopic level of dominance in a life where he ultimately possessed no real power. He was a caged animal, lashing out at the other entities in the enclosure. The relentless psychological pressure eventually triggered a catastrophic breakdown. The inciting incident occurred during a routine session on the facility's high-tech racing simulators. Storm, seeking validation through digital dominance, frequently challenged the other racers. During one specific session, he challenged Tim Treadless, and Jackson Storm lost. For an emotionally regulated athlete, a loss in a training simulator is a minor setback. It is an opportunity to analyze telemetry and improve. For Jackson Storm, it was an existential threat. His entire self-worth, his financial security, and his physical safety had been tethered to his infallible digital performance. To lose on a simulator was to realize that his absolute control was an illusion. The concept of failure intolerance is deeply embedded in Storm's psychological profile. Upon losing to Treadless, the psychological dam broke completely. Storm flew into a violent, uncontrollable rage. He physically attacked the highly expensive simulation equipment, causing extensive damage and ultimately setting off the facility's fire alarms in a desperate, chaotic outburst. This was not the calculated action of a cool, collected villain. It was a severe panic attack from an individual buckling under the weight of systemic abuse. The incident of property destruction provided Axel P. Biggs with the justification he needed to assert his absolute authority. Exhibiting a cold, calculated lack of empathy for the severe psychological distress of the recruit he had blackmailed, Biggs summarily fired Jackson Storm. The billionaire determined that Storm's attitude was an insurmountable liability to the brand, choosing instead to elevate the compliant Tim Treadless as the official face of the Biggs Industries racing team. The cruelty of this sequence of events is staggering. Biggs forcefully dragged Storm out of his safe digital world. He fundamentally altered the trajectory of his existence. He subjected him to immense pressure. And then, he callously discarded him the moment he exhibited emotional instability. This profound abandonment reinforced a devastating internal narrative for Storm. The industry had explicitly communicated to him that he was inherently unlovable. He was entirely disposable. And he was completely alone. He was valued solely for his output, and the moment that output was compromised by human emotion, his worth was reduced to zero. Following his brutal dismissal from Biggs Industries, Storm was cast adrift. The narrative implies a period of severe depression and profound loneliness. The young racer found himself alienated from both his gaming past and his racing present. However, the lore reveals a crucial, transformative turning point that completely subverts the perception of Storm as an irredeemable villain. Ray Reverham. He was the pickup truck initially tasked by Biggs to recruit Storm. He had witnessed the entirety of the corporate abuse. He had seen the blackmail, the pressure, and the subsequent breakdown. Recognizing genuine potential in the broken prodigy, and perhaps harboring a deep sense of guilt for his role in the coercion, Reverham made an unprecedented career decision. He chose to abandon his prestigious position at the state-of-the-art Biggs Industries Training Center. He chose to stay by Storm's side. This singular act of loyalty fundamentally altered the trajectory of Storm's life. Shortly thereafter, a statistical analyst from the Racing Center, who had meticulously tracked Storm's unparalleled performance metrics, contacted IGNTR. Recognizing a lucrative opportunity, the Liquid Adrenaline Company extended a corporate sponsorship to the disgraced rookie. In a rare and powerful display of emotional boundary setting, Storm did not immediately accept the lifeline. He laid down an absolute condition. He would only accept the IGNTR sponsorship if Ray Reverham was hired as his official, permanent crew chief. The dynamic between Jackson Storm and Ray Reverham stands as the most complex, humanizing, and tragic element of Storm's existence. Expanded universe materials, specifically the official prequel novel Storm Chasing, delve deeply into the nuances of this relationship. The literature explicitly details that while Storm initially projected his standard ignorance and defensive egotism toward Reverham, the grueling, isolated training process forced a genuine, profound bond to form. Storm learned to implicitly trust Reverham. He actively dismantled his defensive walls. He treated the crew chief as an equal, rather than looking down on him as he did the rest of the world. This revelation is paramount to the psychological deconstruction of the character. It provides incontrovertible proof that Jackson Storm possesses the capacity for deep respect, fierce loyalty, and meaningful emotional connection. His arrogance, therefore, is not an inherent, immutable biological trait. It is a highly selective, compartmentalized mask, off the track, hidden from the cameras and the crowds, in the presence of the one entity in the universe who did not abandon him. Storm is entirely capable of dropping the tyrannical facade. Reverham serves as his sole emotional anchor, a lone beacon of humanity in a sterile, data-driven existence. During the climactic events of the Florida 500, this dynamic is fully visible. It is Reverham who desperately attempts to ground Storm, urgently warning him of Cruz Ramirez's unexpected approach and trying to manage his driver's rapidly escalating panic. The ultimate tragedy lies in the reality that one supportive relationship, no matter how profound, was insufficient to undo the systemic psychological damage inflicted by Axel P. Biggs and the broader, unforgiving racing industry. When Jackson Storm finally made his official debut in the physical Piston Cup Racing Series at the 2016 Dynaco 400, the world was introduced to a perfectly polished, ruthless machine. His athletic dominance was immediate and terrifying. He secured victory in his very first race. He subsequently embarked on a staggering streak of 10 consecutive wins before claiming his first Piston Cup. He achieved in his rookie season a level of success that veterans had spent lifetimes chasing. However, his athletic brilliance was immediately and permanently overshadowed by his interpersonal toxicity. Storm is widely classified as a master of emotional manipulation and psychological abuse. He routinely engages in passive-aggressive commentary, outright mockery, and systemic disrespect toward his peers. His interactions with the legendary Lightning McQueen are dripping with calculated condescension. He tells the veteran to enjoy his retirement. He openly laughs at him behind his back. He consistently seeks every available opportunity to demoralize the reigning champion. To comprehend this deeply antagonistic behavior, clinical analysis points toward the psychological concept of acquired situational narcissism. Storm's ego is artificially inflated. It is a direct, maladaptive response to his incredibly hostile environment. He behaves like an untouchable god on the track, precisely because he is fundamentally terrified of being the helpless, coerced victim he was in Axel P. Biggs' office. His aggressive posturing is an elaborate preemptive strike. By breaking down his opponents mentally before the race even begins, utilizing psychological warfare to lower their morale, he seeks to minimize the risk of facing a genuine neck-and-neck physical challenge. A physical challenge might trigger a loss, and a loss triggers his deep-seated failure intolerance. He attacks McQueen's legacy not out of genuine hatred, but because McQueen represents a stability and widespread adoration that Storm, isolated and despised by the establishment, can never achieve. The starkest, most heartbreaking contrast between the protagonist, Lightning McQueen, and the antagonist, Jackson Storm, lies in their respective support systems. The narrative structure of the franchise relies heavily on the concept of mentorship. When Lightning McQueen was an arrogant, lost, and egotistical rookie, hurtling toward a hollow existence, he experienced a fortunate accident. He was stranded in the forgotten town of Radiator Springs. There, he encountered the legendary Doc Hudson. Doc provided harsh, unyielding, but profoundly necessary mentorship. He taught McQueen about humility. He taught him the value of community. He taught him the spiritual, emotional essence of racing. Doc Hudson intervened in McQueen's psychological development. He saved him from becoming a permanent monster. Jackson Storm had no Radiator Springs. He had no Doc Hudson. Instead of a wise mentor teaching him the secrets of life and grounding his ego, Storm had Axel P. Biggs. He had a billionaire blackmailer who viewed him strictly as a return on investment. Storm's entire worldview was forged in sterile simulation pods, hostile corporate boardrooms, and the terrifying threat of financial ruin. He was systematically denied the opportunity to develop emotional maturity in a safe environment. The tragic reality is that Jackson Storm is exactly what the modern racing industry demanded he be: a perfectly efficient, highly optimized weapon on wheels, entirely devoid of distracting humanity. The industry built a machine, programmed it to win at all costs, and then condemned the machine when it lacked a soul. The meticulously constructed armor of Jackson Storm faced its ultimate test during the climax of the 2017 season, the Florida 500. The data indicates that Storm entered the race at the absolute peak of his physical capabilities. During practice laps, he systematically shattered his own records. He set a new record for the fastest lap of all time. He peaked in the wind tunnel at a terrifying 245 miles per hour. He was invincible. He was coasting toward a guaranteed championship. However, the narrative shifted drastically when McQueen, recognizing his own physical limitations, swapped himself out mid-race for his Storm's trainer, Cruz Ramirez. Initially, Storm dismissed Ramirez entirely. He viewed her as a non-threat. But as Ramirez began to close the gap, utilizing drafting techniques and adapting to the chaotic environment of an active track, Storm's psychological state began to rapidly deteriorate. The data shows that Storm's strategy relies entirely on maintaining a massive speed gap. He never had to learn defensive racing because no one had ever caught him. As Ramirez pushed into his peripheral vision, Storm abandoned his calm, mocking demeanor. He resorted to desperate psychological suppression. He intentionally slowed his pace. He sacrificed his optimal racing line specifically to drive alongside her, telling her she did not belong on a track and attempting to crush her dreams. This is the action of a terrified individual realizing his control is slipping. The turning point of the race, and the moment that cemented Storm's villainy in the eyes of the public, occurred on the final lap. When Ramirez proved resilient, pushing past his verbal abuse and utilizing his slipstream to pull directly behind him, the fundamental weakness of Storm's character was exposed to the world. Driven into an absolute panic by the impending reality of a highly public defeat, Storm's psychological walls collapsed entirely. The suppressed rage, the trauma of the simulator meltdown, and the terror of losing his only perceived value violently erupted. In a horrifying display, he physically attacked Ramirez. He scraped her violently and attempted to crush her against the concrete wall in a fit of homicidal desperation. This maneuver must be analyzed accurately. It was not the calculated, premeditated strategy of an evil mastermind. It was a chaotic, terrifying tantrum. It was a severe panic attack from a profoundly broken individual who genuinely believed that losing the race equated to the total annihilation of his worth. He did not want to murder Cruz Ramirez. He was a trapped animal, desperately lashing out to eliminate the immediate threat to his survival. The psychological breakdown culminated in Ramirez utilizing Doc Hudson's historic flip maneuver. She soared over the panicking Storm to secure the victory, leaving the next-gen champion in second place. The immediate aftermath of the Florida 500 cemented the destruction of Jackson Storm. The industry that had built him up as the unbeatable future of racing instantly turned on him. The data reveals that following his violent outburst against Ramirez, Storm was officially placed under the Piston Cup watch list due to his reckless and highly dangerous racing tactics. Stripped of his aura of invincibility, formally monitored by racing authorities, and possessing absolutely no friends or support system outside of his crew chief Ray Reverham, Storm was left to navigate the ashes of his coerced career entirely alone. The illusion of the untouchable 2.0 was shattered. To fully comprehend the narrative injustice inflicted upon the character of Jackson Storm, an examination of the film's developmental history is required. The final theatrical cut resolves the primary conflict by having Ramirez defeat Storm. This ending serves the thematic passing of the torch, but it leaves Storm's character arc abruptly and tragically severed. He is humiliated by a trainer on national television, and then he promptly vanishes from the narrative without a single moment of reflection, confrontation, or closure. He is reduced to a flat, empty hurdle to be cleared. However, early drafts of the script reveal a drastically different intended resolution. In deleted scenes titled "The Storm is Over" and "More Than a New Paint," the climax of the film centered on a direct, intense, physical and psychological showdown between Lightning McQueen and Jackson Storm. In these original narrative concepts, McQueen accepts a new offer. He returns to the track to face Storm directly. During this intense final sequence, Storm experiences a severe psychological breakdown as he realizes the aging veteran is actively outmaneuvering him. As McQueen successfully passes Storm to secure the ultimate victory, he pulls up alongside the next-gen racer and delivers the definitive thematic line, "Hey Jackson, Storm is over." The decision to abandon these specific narrative paths profoundly altered the legacy and psychological resolution of Jackson Storm. Had McQueen defeated him directly, it would have provided Storm with a necessary, humbling reality check from a respected peer. It was the exact intervention he desperately required. By denying him this direct confrontation with the protagonist, the final film denies Storm any opportunity for growth. He is defeated not by his primary rival, but by a proxy, leaving him to stew in the toxic humiliation of losing to someone he deemed vastly inferior. The post-Florida 500 fate of Jackson Storm is one of the most hauntingly unresolved conclusions in modern animation. After the confetti settled, Storm effectively ceased to exist within the primary narrative framework. The industry rapidly moved past him. they found a new, far more marketable and socially acceptable narrative in Cruz Ramirez, rendering the dark, aggressive branding of Jackson Storm obsolete. There are minimal, fleeting glimpses of his existence post-defeat. In the short film Miss Fritter's Racing School, Storm makes a brief cameo via news footage. He is seen helplessly watching headlines broadcast his humiliating loss to the entire world. In the canonical video game expansion Cars 3: Driven to Win, the psychological toll is evident. A deeply embittered Storm, growing tired of his declining status, issues a desperate challenge to McQueen and Cruz for a rematch. However, this rematch takes place at the chaotic, unpaved Thunder Hollow Demolition Derby track. Predictably, Storm, a machine designed exclusively for optimal asphalt conditions, is completely out of his element. He ends up terrified, fleeing for his life from the destructive school bus, Miss Fritter. These scattered appearances suggest a character trapped in a permanent downward spiral. He became a ghost in the machine he was forced to build. The expanded literature surrounding the franchise, particularly the official comic book series, offers profound insights into the psychological underpinnings of Storm's character. Titles such as Wounded Pride and An Inflated Ego serve as episodic explorations of a mind struggling to cope with immense pressure. The thematic resonance of the storyline Wounded Pride is particularly crucial. In clinical psychological analysis, wounded pride is the severe emotional response triggered when an individual's core sense of self-worth is publicly compromised. For Storm, his pride was never rooted in a genuine joy for the sport. His pride was rooted entirely in the desperate need to prove his worth to an industry that viewed him as a disposable asset. When his pride is wounded, he lacks the emotional regulation to reflect. Instead, he lashes out defensively. The comic narratives highlight the ongoing tragedy of a character who completely lacks the emotional vocabulary to process defeat. Because he was conditioned by Axel P. Biggs to believe that failure equates to termination, Storm interprets every loss not as a learning opportunity, but as an existential threat to his survival. Further storylines examine the internal war raging within the antagonist. The literature explicitly points to the constant battle between his projected arrogance and his deep-seated, paralyzing insecurities. He is terrified of the silence that follows the roar of the engines. A concept explored in the Quiet Please storylines. When the cameras are off and the physical noise of the track fades, the individual is forced to confront their internal emptiness. For Storm, the silence means confronting the reality that he is alone. He is hated by the public, and he sacrificed his freedom for a world that discarded him the moment he showed weakness. To analyze Jackson Storm through a purely antagonistic lens is to fall victim to the marketing propaganda generated by the fictional corporations within his universe. The Piston Cup and IGNTR sold the public a clean narrative of a ruthless machine. The hidden reality is the harrowing story of a corporate hostage. Jackson Storm is the tragic product of a systemic failure. He is the physical manifestation of what occurs when corporate interests are allowed to ruthlessly commodify youth and talent without providing the necessary emotional infrastructure. Storm was robbed of his digital sanctuary in Super Corsa 3 through malicious corporate blackmail. He was subjected to a cold, failure-intolerant training regime that actively punished vulnerability. He was denied the crucial, life-saving mentorship that saved his predecessor. Every arrogant remark, every aggressive maneuver, and every violent outburst on the track was the desperate flailing of a drowning individual trying to maintain a semblance of control in a life he never actually chose. Even his most reprehensible action, the physical assault on Cruz Ramirez, must be understood not as premeditated malice, but as the catastrophic failure of a fragile psychological construct collapsing under pressure. The ultimate tragedy of Jackson Storm is not that he lost the Florida 500. It is that his loss brought him absolutely no liberation. He remains permanently defined by his trauma, a forgotten casualty of the next-gen revolution he was forced to pioneer. He stands as a dark, haunting mirror held up to the audience, a stark warning that in the blind pursuit of perfection, empathy is the first casualty. Jackson Storm was never truly the villain. He was merely the weapon the real villains left behind on the track. So the next time you watch the Florida 500, don't cheer for his defeat, pity his existence. And if you want to uncover the dark truths hidden inside your childhood favorites, you know exactly where to stay.